traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
But in trying to sort of get better facilities, you've been instrumental in getting a record person, this sort of thing. Has it purely been personal gain, or has it really been to upgrade the whole game of chess, as far as you're concerned?
It's been basically to upgrade the game, and to make it, I mean, personal gain. I haven't been, if I were interested in personal gain, I wouldn't just be taking up chess.
You'd applied your brain to something else, would you?
Yeah, I would be in the stock market. This is where the personal gain is at.
What do you intend to do now?
I want to keep playing a lot of chess.
Yeah, quite. But what's your next target? Do you think there'll be a return game with Spassky soon, for example?
Definitely. I want to play a return match. It's a question of the money, A, and B, it's a question of will the Russians let Spassky play? And then I guess C, does he want to play me?
The big addition to the purse, the £50,000, came from London, from an Englishman. Is it likely you'd consider playing the return match in England?
It's a possibility. I mean, I wouldn't close the door in any place.
It doesn't worry you particularly where it is?
No, I think the States would be a good place for the next match. Because, believe it or not, I mean, that's where they got the facilities for TV and everything. To do it right without, creating a fuss.
How do you rate Spassky now? I mean, what are the chances, do you think, of your holding on again in a return match with Spassky?
Oh, I think I'll beat him, much more easily. There's no question about it in my mind.
This is really because you...
I think, I've broken him.
This is what you really set out to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
How would you rate him compared with other players you've played against?
The best, definitely. He gave me a real fight. All the other players I played, they crumbled at a certain stage, and I never felt that, with Spassky.
Hi, folks. John Cordisco back again with another great chess video for you. I'm going to try something a little different this time. There's been a lot of analyzed videos on YouTube and many other places over the years from the famous 1972 World Championship between Boris Spassky and Bobby Fischer. I remember distinctly as a young boy, I was 15 years old when that came out. I remember being just absolutely mesmerized. It was on my local PBS station. I live in upstate New York, and they, at the PBS station in New York City, let them use the airtime to all the PBS stations in New York. And we had Shelby Lyman and Bruce Pandolfini. Shelby Lyman lives right by here in Sarah, Pennsylvania, right over the border. We're in Binghamton, right above the PA border. And Bruce Pandolfini, if you remember, was played by Ben Kingsley in Looking for Bobby Fischer. And those guys became really famous and actually did very well when chess started booming in the mid-1970s. This is game 11. Now, this isn't a shot to Bobby Fischer. I am a huge, huge, huge fan of his talent and his chess playing ability. Excuse me. But this is a game that I think Boris Spassky never really got the recognition he deserved for being such a great player. In fact, at the end, after the championship match, Fischer said of all the people that he played up to that point to get to the championship, Spassky was the only one that didn't buckle, mentally or physically. This is a game, I think, where Spassky completely outplayed Fischer. It's game 11 of the World Championship in 1972. Spassky has the white pieces, Fischer has the black pieces. It's going to be a Sicilian Najdorf poison pawn. C5 from Fischer, knight to F3, D6, D4, takes, pretty much standard stuff. Knight to F6, knight to C3. It's interesting to see any of you Sicilian Najdorf fans, how the openings have evolved since then. Of course, you got to remember that's way before the chess computer era. A6, bishop G5. As typical in the Sicilian, you'll see black's a little bit behind in development. E6, Reason for that is if he moves anything else, you take here, he either takes here or takes here. And that screws up his pawns, ruins his king side, or isolates this pawn. So after e6, f4. Spassky's going right after him. For somebody that's down and going to lose his title, he fought back. Spassky's a great player. I don't think he got the... he's going to be remembered as the guy that lost to Fischer. But Spassky was a universal player. This took everything, all the ideas other people had, and just improved on them. He's a universal player. I don't think he gets the due he should get. Queen to b6, queen to d2, and this is why they call it the poison pawn. Fischer takes the poison pawn. Knight to b3. I think instead of knight to b3, rook to b1 ought to be investigated. Forcing queen to a3 and then f5. I kind of like that a lot. That's puts black on his heels. Anyway, after Spassky went knight to f3, queen to a3, bishop takes, now pawn takes. And you can see pawns are shattered over here on the king side. Not much protection. But this is Fischer, who in my opinion, all respect to Kasparov, is arguably the greatest player that ever lived. So who am I to second guess the greatest player that ever lived? Bishop to e2, h5, white finally castles, knight to c6. Now look how cramped up black is. I'm really surprised. This isn't like Fischer. His bishop's trapped, this bishop's trapped, his pawns are in shambles over here. Oddly enough, I have my computer on off screen, Fritz 13, and it shows 0.00 for the score. This position is dead drawn. Pretty funny. White goes king to h1. If he had gone knight to b1, was suggested from the computer, queen to a4, knight to c3, queen to a3. And that probably would have been drawn. It's 0.00 on the computer. Of course, those guys know how close it is. Bishop to d7. Black's really behind in development. Look at that dark squared bishop. He's in a bad spot. I think worth consideration might have been h4 for Fischer. It actually gives black an advantage here of about a pawn and a quarter. But he went bishop to d7 with a tiny, I'll say, half a pawn advantage for black. Knight to b1, queen to b4, queen to e3, d5. It's starting to open up position a little bit, which really surprises me because Fischer is uncastled. I think what might have been interesting instead was knight to e7, then after a3, queen to a4. And the queen can finally get back in the game here, hitting the isolated pawn on c2. After d5, e takes, knight to e7. Looks like he's trying to entangle himself a little bit. He's hoping, of course, that Spassky will take. He'll probably take back with the pawn. He's just trying to salvage a draw out of this, I think. c4. White has a very active position here. And I'll tell you, it's a credit to Spassky. Considering everything that went on mentally, it's tough defending your title. You have a lot to lose. And he hasn't been playing too well up to this point. Fischer, of course, is an incredibly gifted and talented player. But even still, I think Spassky gets a lot of credit for this game, and I don't think he gets it, the credit that he deserves. Knight to f5, queen to d3, h4. He finally goes h4. Bishop to g4. Now this is where I think the first goof, the first error fairly large error by Fischer, which is incredibly unusual for him. The computer shows one of two moves, and I analyze it a little bit, and I kind of agree. Either knight to e7 or castles. Long castle. Which makes more sense. What Fischer did was knight to d6. Now I see what he's doing. He's ganging up on the c4 pawn. As we can see here from the illustration, you have this poor pawn. If he had instead castled long, bishop takes, e takes. Now look at this. Triple pawns. That's crazy. But it shows just about a half a pawn advantage for white here. Now how would you play this endgame? Good luck. I really don't know. But these guys are world class. They would have figured it out. But he went knight to d6, which seems a really natural move. But it's an error. Currently now white's almost 2 pawns up. Couldn't have been time trouble. It's move 19. Knight on 1 to d2. As Rex Singfield from the Chess Club and Scholastic Center in St. Louis says, these two knights now are codependent. And now Fischer makes another error, 2 in a row. I don't know if he was having an off day or what was going on. He should probably go rook to c8. I think the position screams out for that. And the computer suggests b6. I like rook to c8 better. He goes f5. Another natural move. He's trying to drive the bishop off. Even after if pawn takes, pawn will probably take, straightening out his pawns. This bishop here is really a large pawn, but as I heard once in a quote, you know, that bishop is basically is guarding the pawns and doing nothing else. But he's guarding a very important pawn. If he had gone rook to c8, a3, queen a4, d takes, bishop takes instead, bishop takes, pawn takes. Now believe it or not, that's a 2.5 point advantage for white. And at this level, you're doomed. Spassky goes a3, chasing Fischer's queen back to b6. And then c5. I mean, what else could he do? What was the queen supposed to go? The queen had gone here. I don't know. I think he's in a really bad spot here. The knight's going to end up coming up here, attacking the queen. It's just a bad position for Fischer in general. Queen to b6, c5, hitting both the knight and the queen. Queen to b5. He's thinking, okay, he'll have to take because the queen's in pre. If the queen had gone to d8 instead, bishop f3, knight to b5, it's still bad news for black. He's going to have a really hard time here. His king's in the center, the attack's coming. After queen to b5, queen to c3, f takes. I think rook to g8 was worth considering. After a4, bishop attacks the queen. It's worth the shot, but black is still doomed. After f takes, a4, hitting the queen. Queen takes h8 really isn't worth much because after knight to f5, rook a to c1, h3, g takes, knight. It's all bad. If he had taken c takes instead, rook to h6, knight to c5, h3. That's a small advantage for white. After a4, h3, Knight to f5 would have been much better. Because after takes the queen, bishop here, and that's doomed. A takes. He's got to lose his queen. Check. King takes. Rook to h3. Right now, believe it or not, it's about a 10-point advantage for white. Fischer probably should have resigned by now. Maybe it was his pride. Queen to f6. Instead of queen to f6, I think c takes. Rook takes. Rook f e1. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. Rook takes. It's actually an advantage for black. So Spassky, of course, knew this. Knight to f5. c6. Here comes the march of the pawns. Now, if anybody's keeping score, Spassky has a queen for a minor piece. Game's over. Bishop to c8. D takes. F takes. Rook f to e1, right on the king. I mean, you've got the queen right here. And this rook bearing down. This knight's coming in. This other rook's coming over. It's bad. It's all bad. Bishop to e7. And rook takes e6. And this is where Bobby Fischer, one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player that ever lived, resigned. I didn't see many videos or analyze games on Game 11 in the championship. I think Spassky played very, very well. Fischer might have had an off day, but even still, show you what happened after rook takes. Rook to h5, queen checks, king to f8, queen takes, bishop takes. And it's it's a 20-point advantage for white. I mean, it's over. Anyway, folks, that's the game for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I remember the game when I was young. Now that I look back now, that's 41 years ago. Wow, how it flies. I'm a huge Bobby Fischer fan. It's because of Bobby Fischer I'm still playing chess over 4 decades later. He inspired the love I have for this game, and for that I'm always grateful to him. What happened to him in his life after this is tragic, to say the least. But I think Spassky is always going to be known for the one that lost the championship to the American, and I think that's unfair. He should be in the top 10 list of greatest players. He's a universal player, great player. And that's the way it goes sometimes. That's the way history is. Sometimes you're treated unfairly. I want you all to remember, if you think chess is just a game, and as Fischer said, chess is life, if you think it's just a game, you're not playing it right. And thank you for all the hundreds and hundreds of views I've had on my recent videos. And thank you very much for the dozens and dozens of subscribers that I've picked up. I can't even begin to tell you how much I appreciate it. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.
Come ride the little train that is rolling down the tracks to the junction. Forget about your cares, it is time to relax at the junction. Lots of curves, you bet, and even more when you get to the junction.
Petticoat Junction.
There's a little hotel called the Shady Rest at the junction.
Petticoat Junction.
It is run by Kate. Come and be her guest at the junction.
Petticoat Junction.
And that's Uncle Joe. He's a moving kind of slow at the junction. Petticoat Junction.